you very much. Well, it is an honor to be with you tonight. I want to say thanks to Ralph Reed for the invitation and for the gracious introduction. A lot of people think that that story about the nailing of my door shut when I became lieutenant governor is apocryphal. The Wall Street Journal actually flew a reporter down to see was it true. They thought it was just one of those exaggerated Arkansas stories. They got there and realized, no, the door is really nailed shut. It was not the greatest kind of welcome that one has to start political office. But you know something? I think sometimes we get surprised when there's opposition to those of us who have deep convictions, not only about biblical issues, but about fiscal issues, who think that government really ought to be smaller and that it tries to do too much. And so sometimes when we act shocked and surprised that there's opposition to that, there really shouldn't be any shock or surprise whatsoever. One of the things that becomes very clear to me, my wife and I just got back from China. We were over there for a little over 2 weeks. We went because it was our 40th wedding anniversary. And yes, I've been married 40 years, and now what you're supposed to do is to say, oh, you're too young to have been married that long. Well, it's too late. You didn't do it, so you can't recover from that. Some of you perhaps would be interested to know that we were actually kind of late bloomers for Arkansas kids. We didn't get married till we were 12. But when we were there, one of the things that was fascinating about China, and my friends have been telling me about it, and I've been all over to the rest of Asia, but I hadn't gone to China, largely because I don't like the Chinese government. I don't like that they manipulate the currency. I don't like that they cheat on infringement of copyright and patent material. I don't like that they dump products against U.S. products, making it more difficult for Americans to compete in manufacturing. There's just a whole lot of things. But friends had told me it's a remarkable place. Well, it is. But here's what I saw. It appears that China is becoming more like America used to be. But what's even more frightening is that America is becoming more like China used to be. There are extraordinary efforts in growth of capitalism. The infrastructure there is booming. They're building high-end stores and shops, and people are moving up from poverty to the middle class and to great levels of prosperity. The way it used to be here, that a person, no matter where he or she started, had an opportunity to grab the next rung on the ladder. I mean, I'm the product of people who did not come over on the Mayflower. My dad used to say, son, don't look very far up the family tree. There's stuff up there you don't need to see. And the old man was right. I looked up there and I thought, oh my gosh. But I also understood that this was America, and in this country, where you start is not where you have to stop. Until in recent years, and where you start is maybe as high as you'll ever get, because we have a government that works doubly hard to make it impossible for people to reach the next rung on the ladder. I thought about some of the things that I frankly did admire about U.S. versus China. You know, I couldn't access a lot of things on the internet. You can't get on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter there because it's blocked by the government. Then again, that might not be a bad idea. But I thought it's so good to know that our government would never tinker with our emails and would never spy on us like the Chinese do, until I realized, but that they do. I talked to a young lady. She was 30 years old. I was asking her about Tiananmen Square as we were standing in Tiananmen Square, and I said, tell me about what you hear, what happened here in 1989. And she looked at me with a bewildered look because she didn't know what happened there. It has been surgically removed not only from every school textbook, but from any discussion in any forum, from any library book. It is impossible to find out officially what happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989 because the Chinese government erases that part of their history. And I thought, I'm so glad that I'm in a country that would never erase a significant part of our history. And then I remember that we are erasing most of the history of this country. We're telling young people that God had nothing to do with the foundation of this country, when in fact there wouldn't be a United States of America if it were not for the men and women of faith who got on their knees to pray and then got on their feet to fight, who took muskets off their mantles and took on the toughest army that had ever existed in the world at that time, and had no chance of creating a new country. But they did. Because of the providence of God's hand is why they did. And you try to find that in an American textbook today in a public school, and good luck doing it. Why is it that we're afraid to tell the students of America that the wealth, the strength, the economy of America, the fact that people who grew up like me were able to get beyond where we came from, was because in this country, the government did not make it hard for a person to be an entrepreneur, did not make it hard for a person to have dreams and hopes and to live them out. Until recently, when now we make it increasingly difficult because it takes more money and lawyers to get started in business than it does ideas. What a tragedy. And I think of the fact that the government owns everything in China, basically. You can live in an apartment, but you don't own it. Not for 70 years will you own it. And I'm thinking, but when we have a government that increasingly wants to tell a farmer that he cannot even grow corn in his yard because he's got to get a permit from the EPA, when we have enough energy sitting under our feet for the next 800 years, but we'd rather continue to be dependent upon foreign sources, when we do not use the energy that we have so that we could make Americans prosperous instead of making some tyrants in the Middle East prosperous so they can take the obscene wealth that we've made for them, turn around and give it to terrorists who are trying to kill us? Right. My heavens, people. What's wrong with a country who makes irrational decisions like that? Well, in part, we have some irrational people running our government right now. That could be a large part of it. People who don't value the life of a human being and believe that every human life has worth and value. While some of us believe that the strength of our country has always been that we valued every person with a sense of equality, and we did not believe that there was any such thing as a person who was expendable or disposable. And the idea that we have killed 55 million unborn children and to show them to be insignificant is a curse for which we will answer. Now, I want to say that we're living in a time where we have a lot of people wanting to completely change the rules, not only of what life means, but what family means, what marriage means. And one of the things that I do not understand is why more Americans have not rallied in opposition to the notion that just because the court says something, that is the final word. Yes. Have we not read our Constitution? Have we not reminded ourselves that we have 3 branches of government, not one, and all of those 3 branches are equal branches of government? One of them is not superior to either of the other 2, and certainly not to both of the other 2. Right. This notion that when the Supreme Court says something, it's the last word, is fundamentally unconstitutional and wrong. It is the Supreme Court, not the Supreme Branch. And we have allowed guys and women in black robes not simply to interpret a law, but to transform a law, rewrite a law, and actually prescribe the fix and implement it. 2 responsibilities and functions that are left exclusively and totally to the legislative and executive branches. It is high time that we recognize that one of the greatest threats to our liberty in this land is the notion of judicial supremacy. There is no such thing in the Constitution of judicial supremacy, and one of the ways in which we must transform America, unlike the way that our current occupant of the White House has transformed America, is to teach our children and to teach our peers that ultimately the authority in this country is not the courts, nor is it even the legislature or the executive branch. The ultimate authority in this country still remains the people of America. We, the people. And if we do not truly believe that and exercise that, we will lose this country not because we have to, but because we've given it away. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you tonight, and it may sound like I'm pessimistic. I want to assure you I am not. And I want to just say to you why. I feel like I'm talking to some people who might be able to recognize this. This is not a time to be pessimistic. Why, there's never been a greater opportunity to show what freedom looks like. There's never been a greater opportunity to show the contrast between those who believe that we bow our knees to the God of judicial supremacy and those of us who believe that ultimately liberty lives in the heart of every single human being. Every American has an opportunity to be free. But I tell you, the ultimate reason for my hope and my optimism is not even government. It's because I believe that there is a God, and that this country would not be here without him, and that if this country will get on its knees and it will ask God's forgiveness for how we have behaved, it's not about the people who hate us, it's about those of us who decide we want to love God more than we want to hate our enemies. And when we get on our knees in forgiveness, God will heal our land, and he will restore us. Folks, I've read the end of the book. Amen. And for all of the people who are wringing their hands and incredibly pessimistic, may I just give you a little hint on what happens. In the end, we win. That's good news. Thank you, and God bless you. Great to be with you tonight.